Of WhatsApp really turned that around. We want to go to our panel. Gene Munster, Piper Jaffray Senior Research Analyst. We have John Herrman, BuzzFeed Tech Editor. And John, I'll start with you alongside us here on set. It's a huge number. That kind of valuation, it kind of takes me back to the year 2000.
Bubbly.
Bubbly, yeah, definitely. What do they think they're really getting here?
It certainly does feel a little bit bubbly, but I think the best way to think of this is to think about what Facebook feels like it might lose and what Zuckerberg is scared of. Facebook is one of the few services in the world that has collected over 1 billion users. Facebook believes that WhatsApp will collect over 1 billion users.
I see. So this is what everybody's using right now. This is the cool, hot new thing. We want to be in this space. I mean, after all, they tried to get Snapchat. They couldn't for a much lower. I mean, we thought that valuation was high, right?
Yeah, but hang on a second. It's the same billion people. I mean, they have 450 million users, all of whom are already on Facebook. Facebook has Messenger, which is exactly the same as WhatsApp.
That's true.
I mean, all they're doing is paying $19 billion so that Google doesn't get WhatsApp. Gene, is that the case?
I think so. You know, they obviously, Facebook has a history with Instagram of turning some nothing into magic, and so. But that said, is that this is a little bit ridiculous, and I think ultimately they have a lot of overlap with the users, and they're talking about monetization down the road when they cross 1 billion. It's just a long ways out. I could see valuation being rich at half that, and so it was a really tough one for us to get our heads around, despite all the opportunity.
Let me ask you, because so much of this was in stock. So in some ways, Facebook doesn't have that much on the line. In some way, shape, or form, you might actually say that Facebook doesn't see stock as perhaps worth that much if it's willing to pay $19 billion primarily in stock. What does it tell you about Facebook's stock price and valuation right now?
The one thing we don't know is if some of the WhatsApp owners actually wanted the Facebook stock. We know they got a lot of it. We don't know they wanted it. And there's been other acquisitions like Zappos, for example, and they were acquired by Amazon. The Zappos management team wanted Amazon stock, and so it's not necessarily an indictment that the company feels that their stock is overvalued when they use stock. Yet you need to kind of figure out what the negotiations and the terms are like. At first cut, it does look like Facebook feels good about their stock price. That's why they did it, but that doesn't tell the whole story.
Let me go back to John for a moment. Isn't there some risk here that they paid all this money and next year there's some new version of Snapchat or WhatsApp or any one of these things? In other words, young people tend to be fickle, and they're always gravitating towards the coolest, hottest new thing out there. And who's to say that WhatsApp is going to be it next year? That's
certainly true. And you could see Facebook trying to get in front of that by trying to acquire Snapchat when it was still relatively small compared to how big it could become. But there are two things to consider here. Facebook's business is really an attention business. It has gotten very good at monetizing the attention that people spend on it every day, just sitting there with it open in their browsers, open on their phones. WhatsApp threatens to take that attention by doing one thing that by doing a single thing very well that Facebook also does. People spend a lot of time looking at newsfeed, looking at pictures, but they also spend a lot of time chatting. And now people are increasingly doing that on WhatsApp. The other thing is Facebook has declared that it is on the hunt for the next Facebook. It's talked about unbundling its services, about new apps, about embracing anonymity. It spent $100 million last year on Onavo, a company designed specifically to identify $100 million.
Drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
Well, they only spent $700 million for Instagram, right? I mean,
drop in the bucket.
When all is said and done, this is nice.
But Instagram has paid off. They want to do Instagram again and again. This wasn't an Instagram. They waited too long on WhatsApp and they spent a lot of money for it, but they still think it's worth it. Instagram was ideal. It sounded expensive at the time, but it has multiplied in size since then, and they're on the hunt for that.
I wonder. That sounded expensive. That sounded expensive, Matt.
Yeah,
and now,
I mean, look, it is ridiculously expensive. There's no way around it. No one can say it isn't an unbelievably expensive price. The question is, I'm filling in for Adam this week, so I will ask a question I think Adam would ask. How are they ever going to make any money at WhatsApp? They don't do advertising. They're not going to do advertising. I've never paid for it. I keep hearing this rumor that you need to pay for it after the first year. I've been using it for 3 years. I've never paid anything for it, unless I paid for it without knowing. Is that how they do it? Are they going to sneak the money out of my wallet? Gene, how do you monetize something like this?
That's a good business model. I like that, sneaking out of the wallet. But I think their basic thing is, it's $1 a year, and they're probably going to inch that up. The big question isn't whether it's $1 a year. how many are actually people are willing to pay that, put their credit card in. It's not about the dollar number. It's about just getting people over that emotional hurdle to get through that paywall. And so that's how they get there. You could argue they could sell virtual goods. There's other things that could be offshoots of it.
But how?
Core.
It's just text messaging. The reason the kids use it is because it's free. The reason it's so popular in Europe is because no one there has a job or money. They use this because it's free, and if they start charging money for it, then someone will come out with Facebook Messenger. Someone will come out with BlackBerry Messenger. Someone will come out with anything, and the kids will migrate to that, won't they?
It's possible, but it's instructive.
I think
the network effect isn't that strong, obviously, or else WhatsApp never would have gotten 450 million users.
But if you look at WeChat, which is one of the largest messaging platforms in the world, it is truly a platform. WhatsApp is just messages for now. WeChat is a lot more like Facebook in that it's centered around one thing, in that case messaging, but there are games, there are stickers.
How much is WeChat?
No, I was going to say, now that's got to be worth that.
It's a $100 billion business, right?
It's harder to understand in the same context because its users are primarily in China.
Chinese.
But the platform is great.
That's actually a very good point here because this company doesn't have a big presence in China.
WhatsApp?
WhatsApp.
Well, it's because WeChat is so completely dominant.
So Facebook has to make another big acquisition.
Gene, some bankers are going to get lucky.
I think they already have.
I think they have. Thanks so much, Gene and John. Gene calling this valuation really, I think it was, quote, ridiculous. It's a lot. We shall see.
And here we get to see Zuckerberg's sort of first real big deal maker status, right?
Yeah,
I mean, he can just have somebody over to dinner a few times and then pay him $20 billion.
Yeah, but he did have to go on Valentine's Day, let's just point out. All right, thanks so much. Great to have you here. Coming up next, we're going to get to these